Radio Wammo Breakfast. Joining us now to talk about the high-tech stories of the week, Paul Brislen from twitter.com/Paul Brislen, head of 2ANZ as well. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, thanks. And through the mysteries of the ultra-fast New Zealand internet right now, we are talking to you.
I'll move. Maybe that'll upset it a bit more. Look.
He's all kind of crazy, pixelated. But anyway, let's talk about the future of broadband in New Zealand. There was a conference this week called Future Broadband. What was the guts of it?
So the Commerce Commission put together this conference to discuss all the issues that might arise that would stop people from moving to our shiny new ultra-fast broadband network once that gets up and running. And it was one of the more interesting and uplifting broadband conferences I've ever been to. Normally they're full of people complaining about why haven't we got it and when's it coming and somebody else should build it and I don't want it and I don't want to pay for it and somebody else should pay for it. This was far more about what are you going to do with it once it gets here, which is tremendous. It's bags of fun. And we had some really good discussions about all kinds of things. We had the technologies you'll need to run over this kind of thing, the kind of economic outputs that can come from it. We got into the whole debate around content as well, around Sky TV and whether or not there is in fact a monopoly on content. And Sky assures us that they have none of the rights that are needed for this kind of thing. It's called SVOD, Subscriber Video On Demand rights. And they simply don't have any of those rights for any of the material that everybody seems to think they do. So they're not holding up anybody else from rolling out service, and so it's not their fault. And everybody else disagreed, which is quite an interesting idea, really. It's going to be an interesting year ahead, I think.
What's your opinion on that? I mean, they say they don't have the rights, but surely they could get those rights if they wanted, and probably would have first dibs on them.
Well, I would say they've probably got some kind of first dibs advantage. But if they are right and they don't have any kind of control over the rights as they stand today, then you've got to ask why somebody else isn't coming in and offering that. And the answer to that is probably that New Zealand is just quite small and quite far removed. And if you are going to be negotiating with Warner Brothers and HBO and all the rest of them, you need a bit of scale. So I imagine we're likely to see a situation develop where Sky or somebody else aggregates all of the demand for New Zealand and goes out to these guys and said, okay, now we've got 4 million customers. That moves us up the food chain a little bit. Let's have a conversation about what we can do for New Zealand customers. So it's a tricky one. You know, I'd like to see a lot more of this happening sooner rather than later. But at the moment, it's all a bit moot anyway because people are just going out and torrenting it. And there's a lovely cartoon doing the rounds of the internet at the moment that compares the process for trying desperately to buy content online and being able to just go on out and steal it, which is unfortunately the situation at the moment.
A lot of talk and moaning about data caps in New Zealand at this conference. Was the moaning loud enough for anyone to listen? And are we going to see data caps disappear in some form this year?
Well, that is the big push, is that data caps, as they stand in New Zealand, are a restriction on uptake. They're there for certain reasons, and a lot of them are historic. A lot of these reasons are to do with the way the network has been set up over time and the way it's been managed. And I've got a guest post from a certain blogger who we will put up later on today on the 2ANZ website, all about caps and how they work and why they work the way they do. But I would be expecting to see the end of caps once we move to the ultra-fast broadband network. There's absolutely no need for us to be restricting data if we're buying a service based on speed. So one of the reasons we've got caps at the moment is that the Commerce Commission made it quite clear to the ISP some time ago that you can't advertise 10 megabits a second or 15 megabits a second in terms of speed unless you can guarantee you can provide that. And because of DSL, the technology we use, you can't guarantee that the customer will receive that speed.
Right.
So the ISPs have looked for another differentiator, and they've gone out and they've decided that if you can't talk about speed, well, let's talk about data. And that's how you segment your market. So an entry level will have this much data, but if you pay more, you get even more data further up the food chain. So that's how they've done it. And under the UFB, of course, we are selling things on price. It will be, 30 down, 10 up, 50-50, 100-100, this kind of thing. So then there's no need for them to differentiate on data. And I would hope that they take the opportunity to move away from it. Internationally, we're one of the very few countries that have predominantly data-capped plans. There are 4 that have nothing but data-capped plans and are slowly moving to an uncapped world. Most of the rest are uncapped and are slowly introducing caps.
Yeah.
Very, very high. So for the money I spend in New Zealand and get 120 gig of data, I could save money. I could save about $40 a month and get 1 terabyte of data from iiNet in Australia.
Wow.
500 gig on peak, 500 gig off peak. And I would just, that's unlimited. I wouldn't, there would be no problem there. I just leave the machine running all the time. So that is the issue that the ISPs here are facing.
You'd leave those torrents going 24/7.
But, eventually somebody will find a way to let me pay them, and I will happily pay for my content. We've had this discussion as well, That's the key to all of this. Yeah. Let me give you money. I want to give you money. Yes. Please let me.
Please.
But no. So I do think the whole Sky debate is very important, but it's also a little bit of a red herring because the debate is framed up as Sky versus other rights holders. Whereas the actuality on the ground is it's rights holders versus customers. So it's a different dichotomy and it's a different model. And nothing that we're talking about is going to solve that because people who want the content will just carry on getting it.
Yeah. And this week we were both lucky enough to get our hands on a phablet, Paul.
Phablet, is that what we're going to call them? Phablets. And I must say, I was quite impressed. I wasn't prepared to be, but I thought this was really quite a good compromise between the full iPad-size functionality, or even the larger tablets that you're starting to see come out, and the phone itself. Yeah. So this is I'm going to get the name wrong, aren't I? The Samsung Galaxy Note. Yeah. Which is 5 point something inches in diameter. Corner to corner. Yeah. And is larger than an iPhone by a long chalk, but it's much smaller than an iPad for those who are Apple fans. And I found it really quite useful. The screen is gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning, isn't it? And you can dive in and swim around in there. It's a beautiful looking screen. It feels a bit odd when you first look at it and think I can't hold that up to the side of my head. It's like, it's like my tape. Hello, it's not going to work. It's just ridiculous. But it actually worked quite well in practice. And Chris Keel from NBR's tweeted out a photo of me using one, and it just looks like a phone. You wouldn't know any different.
It's true.
So that was quite good. But the interesting thing I found was the stylus. Back to the Future. Yeah, I can't think what year it was. 1999. My Palm 5 had a stylus. And was incredibly useful for that. But they've long since faded into memory, and now they're making a comeback. And watching an artist drawing a picture on the screen of this thing, the screen technology's come on so far that he was able to do an awful lot with it, far more than I would be expecting from a touch screen. It was incredibly sensitive, so the stylus worked really well.
So it sounds like it's one of those devices yet again that could be great for business, but for play as well. You could imagine architects using these kinds of things, I suppose.
Well, that's right. And I've downloaded an app for my my iPad that allows me to draw on the screen, but I use my fat pudgy finger, and it's just like crayons. So I can write notes to myself, or I can draw on the screen and annotate things. But with a stylus and with a much more refined digitizer, which is the thing that sits in behind the screen and translates where you're touching into whatever it is you're trying to write. Yeah. It worked incredibly well, and I was quite impressed with the results. Plus, it's running on Android, of course, and you've got all of the App Store and everything else that goes on there. So there's an awful lot. I've pixelated again. Look at that. I'm 8-bit.
Are you happy with your caricature?
It didn't look much like me, but as the chap said, he was very tired and he was apologising before he started. But I was just impressed with the ability for him to draw anything at all on this screen.
Yeah.
And, it's definitely a man wearing glasses, and it could well be me. I'll be sorting out my passport photo for it anytime soon.
Yeah, you're right. Excellent. Paul Brislen has been looking at ultra-fast broadband for us and the Samsung Galaxy Note. You can continue the conversation with him on Twitter, twitter.com/Paul Brislen, and we'll see him next week as well in 8-bit form. See ya.